Virtue ethics is an approach to morality that emphasizes the character of the moral agent over rules or consequences. Unlike deontological theories, which focus on duties and obligations, or consequentialist theories, which center on the outcomes of actions, virtue ethics is concerned with the development of virtues, traits or qualities that constitute good character. A person who practices virtue ethics strives to cultivate virtues such as courage, honesty, compassion, and wisdom, believing that a good life is achieved not merely through following rules or maximizing utility, but through becoming a good person. The origins of virtue ethics can be traced back to ancient Greek philosophy, particularly the works of Aristotle. In his Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle presents the idea that the ultimate goal of human life is eudaimonia, a Greek word often translated as happiness or flourishing. For Aristotle, eudaimonia is not simply a matter of feeling good or experiencing pleasure, it is a state of living well, in accordance with reason, and fulfilling one's potential as a human being. Achieving eudaimonia requires the development of virtues, which are habits or dispositions that enable a person to act in accordance with reason and to live in harmony with others. According to Aristotle, virtues are the mean between two extremes, or vices. For example, the virtue of courage lies between the extremes of recklessness and cowardice. A person who is reckless takes unnecessary risks without regard for their safety, while a coward avoids challenges out of fear. The courageous person, however, strikes a balance, facing danger when appropriate but also taking reasonable precautions. This idea of virtue as a mean between extremes is central to Aristotle's theory of virtue ethics. It emphasizes the importance of moderation, practical wisdom, and context in moral decision-making. Virtue is not about adhering to rigid rules, but about developing the judgment to navigate complex situations in a way that promotes flourishing. One of the key features of virtue ethics is its focus on moral education and the development of good character over time. According to Aristotle, virtues are not innate, they must be cultivated through practice and habituation. Just as a person becomes a skilled musician by practicing their instrument, so too does a person become virtuous by repeatedly practicing virtuous actions. Over time, these actions become ingrained habits, shaping the individual's character. Thus, virtue ethics emphasizes the importance of moral upbringing, social environments, and role models in the development of virtues. A person becomes virtuous not by merely learning abstract moral principles, but by observing and emulating virtuous individuals and by engaging in communities that promote virtuous behavior. This focus on moral development also distinguishes virtue ethics from other ethical theories, such as deontology and consequentialism. In deontological ethics, moral actions are defined by adherence to rules or duties, regardless of the consequences. In consequentialism, moral actions are judged by their outcomes, with the aim of maximizing overall happiness or well-being. Virtue ethics, by contrast, is concerned with the question of what kind of person one should be, rather than which actions one should perform. For the virtue ethicist, morality is not a matter of following rules or calculating consequences, but of developing good character traits that enable a person to live a fulfilling and morally good life. Another important aspect of virtue ethics is its recognition of the role of emotion in moral life. While deontological and consequentialist theories often portray morality as a purely rational enterprise, virtue ethics acknowledges that emotions play a crucial role in shaping moral behavior. For Aristotle, virtues are not just rational dispositions, they also involve the proper alignment of emotions. For instance, the virtue of compassion involves feeling the right degree of concern for others' suffering, while the virtue of temperance involves regulating desires for pleasure. A virtuous person not only knows what is morally right but also feels the appropriate emotions in response to moral situations. In this way, virtue ethics offers a more holistic understanding of moral life, one that integrates both reason and emotion in the pursuit of moral excellence. In addition to Aristotle, other philosophers have contributed to the development of virtue ethics. The Stoics, for example, emphasized the importance of inner virtue and self-control, arguing that happiness comes from living in accordance with nature and cultivating virtues such as wisdom, justice, and courage. For the Stoics, external circumstances, such as wealth, health, or social status, are largely beyond our control, and true happiness depends on developing a virtuous character that remains stable in the face of adversity. This emphasis on inner virtue and resilience has made Stoic ethics a source of inspiration for many people throughout history, particularly in times of hardship or uncertainty. In the modern period, virtue ethics experienced a revival, thanks in part to the work of philosophers such as Gem Anscombe and Alastair MacIntyre. In her influential essay, Modern Moral Philosophy, 1958, Anscombe criticized the dominance of deontological and consequentialist approaches in contemporary moral philosophy, arguing that they had lost sight of the importance of character and moral psychology. She called for a return to a virtue-based approach to ethics, one that emphasizes the cultivation of good character over the application of abstract moral principles. MacIntyre, in his book After Virtue, 1981, further developed this critique, arguing that one of the key strengths of virtue ethics is its ability to account for the complexity and variability of moral life. Unlike deontological theories, which often rely on rigid rules, or consequentialist theories, which focus on calculating outcomes, virtue ethics recognizes that moral decision-making is often context-dependent and requires practical wisdom. The virtuous person, according to Aristotle, is someone who possesses phronesis, practical wisdom or moral insight, which enables them to navigate complex moral situations and to find the right balance between competing values. This emphasis on practical wisdom allows virtue ethics to adapt to the diversity of human experience and to accommodate the fact that different situations may require different responses. For example, consider the virtues of honesty and kindness. In some situations, being honest may require telling unpleasant truths, even if doing so causes discomfort. In other situations, kindness may take precedence, and a virtuous person might choose to withhold information or phrase things more gently in order to avoid causing unnecessary harm. Virtue ethics allows for this kind of flexibility, recognizing that moral decision-making is not a matter of applying a one-size-fits-all rule but of exercising judgment and balancing different virtues in a way that promotes flourishing. However, virtue ethics is not without its challenges and criticisms. One common criticism is that it lacks clear guidance for action. Whereas deontological ethics provides rules, e.g. do not lie, and consequentialism offers a decision-making procedure, e.g. maximize happiness, virtue ethics seems to offer little in the way of concrete moral guidance. Critics argue that by focusing on the cultivation of character rather than the formulation of rules, virtue ethics leaves individuals without clear criteria for determining what to do in specific situations. In response, defenders of virtue ethics argue that this critique misunderstands the purpose of the theory. Virtue ethics is not intended to provide a simple, rule-based system for moral decision-making. Rather, it emphasizes the importance of developing moral judgment and practical wisdom. The virtuous person, they argue, does not need a set of rules to tell them how to act in every situation. Instead, they rely on their cultivated character and their ability to discern the right course of action in context. Just as a skilled musician does not need to follow a rigid set of instructions to perform well, so too does the virtuous person act in accordance with their moral understanding and experience, responding appropriately to the unique demands of each situation. Another criticism of virtue ethics is that it can be seen as overly reliant on cultural norms and social roles. Since virtues are often understood in relation to the practices and traditions of particular communities, critics argue that virtue ethics may reinforce existing power structures and social hierarchies. For example, in societies where certain roles, such as those of women or minorities, are undervalued or restricted, a virtue ethicist might be seen as endorsing these roles as part of the moral fabric of the community. This raises concerns about whether virtue ethics can adequately address issues of injustice, inequality, and oppression. In response to this criticism, some virtue ethicists argue that the theory is not inherently conservative or tied to specific social roles. Rather, virtues such as justice, courage, and compassion can be used to critique and challenge unjust practices and institutions. A virtuous person, they argue, is not someone who blindly conforms to social norms, but someone who critically engages with their community and works to promote the common good. Furthermore, the emphasis on practical wisdom in virtue ethics allows for the possibility of moral growth and reform, as individuals and societies can come to recognize and correct moral failings over time. In this way, virtue ethics can be seen as a dynamic and adaptive approach to morality, one that is capable of responding to changing social circumstances and evolving understandings of justice. Virtue ethics offers a compelling alternative to rule-based and consequence-based approaches to morality by emphasizing the development of good character and the cultivation of virtues. Rooted in the ancient Greek philosophy of Aristotle and further developed by thinkers such as the Stoics, virtue ethics provides a holistic understanding of moral life that integrates reason, emotion, and social context. While the theory faces challenges, particularly in terms of providing clear action guidance and addressing issues of social justice, its emphasis on practical wisdom, moral education, and the complexity of moral decision-making makes it a rich and flexible framework for navigating the ethical challenges of human life. In continuing the exploration of virtue ethics, it is essential to delve further into its applications in modern contexts and how it engages with contemporary moral dilemmas. While virtue ethics originates from ancient philosophy, its relevance extends to present-day ethical challenges, where rigid adherence to rules or calculation of consequences may fall short in addressing the nuanced and multifaceted nature of human life. One of the key strengths of virtue ethics is its ability to account for the importance of moral character and moral development in shaping ethical behavior, making it especially significant in fields such as education, politics, and professional ethics. However, this also raises further questions about the theory's ability to address systemic and structural issues like inequality, justice, and global responsibilities. In the realm of education, virtue ethics has profound implications for how moral development is understood and cultivated. Unlike ethical frameworks that focus solely on teaching rules or principles, virtue ethics suggests that moral education should be about the cultivation of character from a young age. This process involves guiding individuals toward the development of virtues such as patience, humility, generosity, and resilience. The goal, from a virtue ethics perspective, is not merely to teach students what is right or wrong in abstract terms but to help them become the kind of people who consistently act in virtuous ways. In this sense, moral education is not just about intellectual understanding but about shaping the whole person, developing their emotional sensitivities, habits, and practical wisdom. Phronesis. This approach to moral education has gained traction in recent years through movements such as character education and social-emotional learning, both of which emphasize the importance of cultivating virtues in students. Rather than focusing exclusively on academic achievement, these programs aim to foster qualities like empathy, self-control, and perseverance, which are seen as essential for both personal well-being and social cooperation. Advocates of virtue ethics argue that such programs are crucial not only for developing moral individuals but for creating a more just and compassionate society. By focusing on the development of virtuous character, schools and educators can play a central role in shaping the moral landscape of future generations. In professional ethics, virtue ethics also offers a unique perspective that contrasts with more rule-based or outcome-oriented approaches. For instance, in fields such as medicine, law, or business, ethical dilemmas often arise that cannot be easily addressed by simply following a set of rules or calculating the best consequences. Virtue ethics, with its emphasis on character, encourages professionals. One of the key insights that virtue ethics brings to professional ethics is the idea that being a good professional is not just about technical competence but about moral character. For example, in the business world, debates about corporate responsibility often focus on whether companies should prioritize profits or social welfare. A virtue ethics approach, however, would shift the focus to the character of business leaders and employees, asking whether they possess virtues such as honesty, fairness, and accountability. From this perspective, ethical business practices arise not from following external regulations or maximizing shareholder value, but from individuals within the corporation acting virtuously in their decisions and interactions. This approach highlights the importance of moral leadership and the role that character plays in shaping ethical organizational cultures. However, critics of virtue ethics argue that its focus on individual character may not be sufficient to address systemic and structural issues, particularly in fields like politics and social justice. For instance, while it is important for political leaders to possess virtues such as justice, courage, and wisdom, virtue ethics does not provide a clear framework for addressing large-scale social inequalities or institutional injustices. Critics argue that focusing on individual virtues may obscure the need for structural changes in laws, policies, and institutions that perpetuate injustice. For example, while it is important for individuals to be compassionate and charitable, these virtues alone may not be enough to address issues such as poverty, racism, or climate change, which require collective action and systemic reform. In response, defenders of virtue ethics argue that the theory is not necessarily incompatible with systemic critiques or social justice movements. While virtue ethics emphasizes the development of individual character, it also acknowledges the importance of moral communities and social contexts in shaping moral behavior. For Aristotle, virtues are cultivated within a community, and the flourishing of individuals is closely tied to the flourishing of the society as a whole. In this sense, virtue ethics can be seen as supporting the idea that just societies are necessary for the cultivation of virtuous individuals. If a society is structured in a way that promotes injustice or inequality, it may be difficult for individuals within that society to fully develop and exercise their virtues. Therefore, virtue ethics can be used to critique unjust social structures and to advocate for reforms that create conditions in which individuals can flourish. Moreover, some contemporary virtue ethicists have expanded on Aristotle's ideas by incorporating social and political dimensions into the theory. For example, feminist virtue ethicists have argued that traditional virtue ethics has often been shaped by patriarchal assumptions about gender roles. In this way, virtue ethics can be expanded to address broader ethical challenges, such as global inequalities, environmental degradation, and social justice. Rather than focusing solely on individual character, these approaches emphasize how social, political, and environmental conditions shape the cultivation of virtues and how virtues, in turn, can guide collective efforts to create a more just and sustainable world. For example, in the context of climate change, a virtue ethics approach would not only encourage individuals to reduce their carbon footprint but also emphasize the importance of cultivating civic virtues such as responsibility, solidarity, and justice, which are necessary for collective action on a global scale. However, one of the persistent challenges for virtue ethics remains its lack of concrete action guidance. While virtue ethics provides a rich account of moral development and the importance of character, it offers less in terms of specific rules or principles for determining the right course of action in every situation. Critics argue that in complex or ambiguous moral situations, virtue ethics may leave individuals uncertain about what to do, as it relies on the judgment of the virtuous person rather than on clear ethical guidelines. In response, virtue ethicists argue that this flexibility is actually one of the strengths of the theory. Unlike rule-based approaches, which can be rigid and fail to account for the complexities of real-life situations, virtue ethics allows for context-sensitive moral reasoning. The virtuous person, through the development of practical wisdom, is able to navigate moral situations by considering the specific details, relationships, and values at play. This emphasis on moral judgment acknowledges that ethical life is often messy and that rigid rules may not always be sufficient to capture the nuances of human experience. Moreover, virtue ethicists argue that the focus on character provides a more holistic and long-term approach to morality. Rather than thinking of ethical dilemmas as isolated events that require immediate solutions, virtue ethics encourages individuals to think about their moral development over time and to cultivate the habits and dispositions that will enable them to respond to future challenges in a virtuous way. In this sense, virtue ethics is less about prescribing specific actions and more about shaping the kind of person one becomes, enabling individuals to navigate the complexities of life with moral insight and integrity. Focusing on character as a central aspect of human development has been a topic of moral philosophy and education for centuries. The question of whether we should prioritize character development over other aspects of ethical and personal growth is particularly relevant in modern societies, where rapid technological advancements and shifting social norms have led to increasing complexity in defining what it means to live a good life. Advocates of character-focused approaches argue that character is the foundation of moral behavior and personal fulfillment, while critics suggest that emphasizing character may overlook the importance of systemic and structural factors in shaping human behavior. Nevertheless, the idea that cultivating character should be a primary concern resonates deeply, not only because of its historical roots but also because of its potential to address contemporary ethical challenges. Character refers to the set of virtues, values, and traits that define who a person is and guide their behavior in the world. Qualities such as honesty, integrity, courage, and compassion are often considered core components of good character. Unlike traits that are purely innate or biologically determined, character is something that can be cultivated and developed over time through education, experience, and reflection. This is one of the reasons why character has been a focal point in many moral traditions, including those of Aristotle, Confucius, and religious figures such as Jesus and the Buddha. These thinkers and traditions emphasize that a good life is not simply a matter of following rules or achieving external success, but of developing good character and living in accordance with virtues. One of the most compelling arguments for focusing on character is that it provides a foundation for moral behavior that transcends specific rules or external incentives. Rules and laws are often necessary to regulate behavior in society, but they can only go so far in ensuring ethical conduct. A person who follows rules out of fear of punishment or desire for reward may not be truly moral, in the sense that their actions are motivated by self-interest rather than a genuine concern for others or for doing what is right. In contrast, a person with strong character does the right thing because it is in alignment with their values and because they have habituated themselves to act in virtuous ways. For example, someone with the virtue of honesty. This focus on internal motivation and the development of good habits is one of the key insights of virtue ethics, a moral theory that emphasizes character over rules or consequences. For virtue ethicists, the goal of moral development is to cultivate virtues, traits of character that enable a person to live well and flourish. Aristotle, one of the most influential virtue ethicists, argued that the ultimate goal of human life is eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or happiness. In the context of education, focusing on character development can have profound and lasting effects on both individuals and society. Many educational systems today emphasize academic achievement, technical skills, and standardized testing as the primary measures of success. While these are undoubtedly important, they often neglect the moral and emotional aspects of human development. Character education, by contrast, focuses on helping students develop virtues such as empathy, perseverance, and responsibility. It encourages students to reflect on what kind of person they want to become and how they can contribute to the well-being of others. By fostering good character in young people, educators can help create a more ethical and compassionate society in which individuals are equipped not only with knowledge and skills but also with the moral compass needed to navigate the challenges of life. Moreover, a focus on character can help address some of the social and political challenges of our time. In an era marked by increasing polarization, inequality, and environmental degradation, it is clear that many of the problems we face are not simply technical or political, but moral in nature. Issues such as corruption, dishonesty, and greed are often rooted in failures of character, where individuals prioritize personal gain or power over the common good. By emphasizing character development, we can encourage individuals to act with integrity, humility, and a sense of responsibility toward others and the planet. This is not to say that character alone can solve all of society's problems. Systemic and structural changes are also necessary, but it can play a crucial role in fostering the kind of ethical leadership and civic engagement needed to address these challenges. Another important reason to focus on character is that it allows for a more holistic understanding of human well-being. Many modern approaches to success and happiness are narrowly focused on material wealth, status, or pleasure. However, these external markers of success often fail to lead to lasting fulfillment. Research in psychology has shown that while material wealth and personal achievement can contribute to happiness to a certain extent, factors such as strong relationships, a sense of purpose, and personal integrity are far more significant in contributing to long-term well-being. A person with good character is more likely to build meaningful relationships, contribute positively to their community, and live with a sense of purpose, all of which are key components of a fulfilling life. However, focusing on character is not without its challenges and criticisms. One of the primary criticisms is that it may place too much emphasis on individual responsibility and overlook the role of social, economic, and political structures in shaping behavior. For instance, a person who grows up in a violent or corrupt environment may find it much harder to develop virtues such as honesty,